Okay, hello and welcome to our weekly Wednesday night live stream. I am your host, Dana Morningstar, and this is a live stream that I try and do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you are new here, welcome, and if you are returning here, welcome. Let me just say something in the chat to get that going. And okay. So, yes, there we are. If you would like to be notified when I go live, you can sign up for the text service by what is it? Texting the words Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999. There's also another text alert service that I have. You can join. It's words of encouragement, and it comes out, I send out about 3 or 4 messages a week. You can subscribe to that by texting the words I thrive, all one word, to the number 22999. So let's see if anybody's hopping on this evening. How is everybody doing? What is new and exciting in your world? It is snowing, if you can believe it, where I am, which is pretty wild to think about. But I guess it is what it is, right? I don't know about you, but I'm ready for some warm weather. Let's see, is there anything anybody in particular would like to talk about this evening? Any topics that are on your mind? Jessica says, "Hi, Dana." Hi, Jessica. Welcome. Oh, hi, Jack. He says, "Oh, Dana, your hair looks fab." You are very kind. My hair is pretty wild this evening. I switched up my shampoo and conditioner, and it's floofy. I have floofy hair. So thank you. I'm glad. I think it might look better on camera than it does in person. Lisa says, "Oh, yay. Just happened to see this come up. Thanks." Well, welcome, Lisa. We're glad to have you. How's everybody's week going? Anything new and exciting going on? We could talk about challenges, kind of the high points of your week or the low points of your week. Oh, I love that. Good for you, changing my life. Congratulations. She says, "I released my book today. It's called I Am: How to Release the Shame of Narcissistic Abuse and Transform Financial Poverty to Wealth Beyond Numbers. Proceeds help survivors of abuse when they leave the safe house." Awesome. That is so cool. That's a huge undertaking to write a book and to publish it and put it out into the world. So I hope that you take some time to just acknowledge that victory, just getting across the finish line with that, because it's absolutely huge. It's I've written a couple books too, and uh, man, is it nerve-wracking. It's so hard when you put it out into the world because uh, it's out there. And I think one of the most, well, I forget who said it, but I read somewhere something along the lines of, like, for creative people, um, like, our job is and to create and to put things out into the world and then to let go. And that gave me such a sense of peace, uh, knowing that, because at least for my first book, I, I was reading all the reviews, and um, man, if anybody pointed anything out, I just, um, I was so hard on myself. And then of course you kind of you might go through it later on in a few years and you're like, oh, why didn't I add this part? Or why, you're kind of second guessing some of the decisions you made. It can be a very emotional process. So um, I guess just kind of know that. Um, and don't try to not, if you do experience that, try to not let that diminish what you've done. So um, because it's writing a book, it's like running a marathon. It's all about um, putting in the time and effort and getting it done and getting it out, and it's such a challenge. So can we, yeah, Jack asked, where can we find your book, Changing My Life? Yes. Is it on Amazon? We'll have to look it up and see if it's on Amazon. Changing My Life says it's ranking number 1. I feel so blessed. It's a story and self-help of 14 survivors. Very, very cool. Good for you. Yay. Yay, you. Lisa, okay, this is a great question kind of for the audience in general. She says, how about some self-care tips and challenges? I just ended 5 years of parent care and I am so tired. Dumped the narcissist, but my brain is still fried from his tantrums, but at least I can breathe. Well, wow, yes. Talk about um, you're basically running two different marathons there. Talk about having a lot going on. 5 years of parent care and being in kind of this crazy making, emotionally draining relationships with the narcissist. So self-care tips and challenges. I'll share with you some of mine. I hope that other people weigh in and yeah, we'll just kind of go from there. So self-care takes many different forms. And um, so there's physical self-care, like getting a massage or taking a bubble bath or allowing yourself to get to bed a little earlier or, um, whatever that might look like. There's emotional self-care. So um, there's lots of things to do around emotional self-care. One of, I think, my top things top tips is boundaries. Boundaries work wonders when it comes to taking care of your taking care of yourself emotionally. So being being mindful and intentional about what you're saying yes to and what you're saying no to. So really um, kind of being selective, guarding your time, your energy, your emotions, your space, all of these things. Boundaries is a huge one in terms of self-care. You have, there's financial self-care. um, there's For some people there's spiritual self-care. um, so there's lots of different kinds, but thinking about or at a minimum like checking in with yourself on a fairly regular basis. I would say, at least a handful of times every day, to notice how are you feeling and what are you needing in that moment, because you've gone through two very very intense situations, and so that what you're needing might fluctuate wildly. You might need on in one moment to feel, you might be sad, or you might be mad. You might be um, feeling like I need to feel validated, or I want to feel heard, or um, you know any number of things. You might have a lot of energy, you might not have very much energy at all. Like you might just feel kind of all over the place, and that's, I think, kind of to be expected. So being compassionate with yourself, being and coming from a place of curiosity, trying to figure out, okay, well, what's going on with me and what do I need in this moment. And I think with the compassion part, realizing that emotion that's surfacing right now because you've had these two very intense experiences. All of the emotions that are surfacing are all very normal, and um, and that's okay. You feel how you feel, and that's okay. So, some of the challenges with self care. Oh boy, after getting out of a relationship with a narcissist, I think for a lot of people, it's actually getting in tune with how they feel. For a lot of people, they've coming out of a narcissistically abusive relationship, they've had all of this time where their feelings have gone unheard or invalidated. And so the result of that is there's this big disconnect where they're not sure. They're like, well, I'm not sure if I'm frustrated or mad, or if I'm just overly emotional. And so they're kind of discounting how they're feeling. And it can take some time to connect your feelings to situations. More often than not, how we're feeling is connected to something. We tend to, it's, uh, more often than not, the way that we feel, there's some sort of catalyst for how we're feeling. And so if we can connect that of, oh, I'm feeling really grumpy, or um, if you catch yourself crying, or whatever it might be, like, okay, where is this coming from? And instead of immediately shutting those feelings down, or brushing them off or discounting them, oh, I just, it's that time of the month, or oh, it's I'm just overly emotional, or oh, it's just been a long day, thinking, okay, well, that might all be true, but is there more to it than that? And um, realizing that if something upset you, then it upset you. Other people don't have to agree with you. And this is kind of going back to that narcissistically abusive relationship. People that have been in that relationship for so long where their feelings have gone invalidated, um, they tend to really struggle with that. And so they look outside of themselves for other people to let them know, is to for validation. Is this a problem? Like, I'm not quite sure if this is a problem or not. Maybe I just have the issue. And when in reality, it's like, nope, that makes complete sense. If somebody's calling you names, or rolling their eyes, or making subtle kind of snide comments that are kind of hitting a little deep or a little below the belt, it's understandable that you would feel hurt or upset, or not comfortable around them. So acknowledging how you feel is very difficult for people out fresh out of a narcissistically abusive relationship. I think the added challenge in your position, Lisa, is the fact that you were also doing 5 years of parent care. And so it's a similar challenge when a person is in that role of a caregiver for another person, kind of more often than not, um, and unless they really have solid boundaries, which I think is very rarely the case, because these kinds of situations can very quickly, um, the time amount, it can very quickly take over your life. And I don't know exactly what your situation was, but kind of, how we anticipate something going down and then how things actually unfolding tend to be two different things. So if this was your situation where you're taking care of your parent, there's a very solid chance that you were having to put their needs front and center and put your own on the back burner. And so that's kind of that double whammy of getting in tune with your feelings again, instead of kind of learning to compartmentalize and kind of turning down the volume on them. So realizing that your wants and needs and thoughts and feelings, and they matter just as much as anybody else's, and it's okay and it's important that you reconnect with all of that. So that's what I have for you. Let's see what some other people have to say. about this. If Huffle Mom asks, Dana, did you get my email? It has my quote unquote homework assignment in it. No, I didn't get a chance. This week has been absolutely wild. I, let me see. I think Paul might have sent me them. Let me just check real quick here. Hold on. Let's see if I can pull this up. Sorry, guys. Hang tight. Just bear with me. Okay, looks like I'll have to read through this. I guess let's talk about this next week. Changing. So I apologize for that. Thank you for doing that. And like I said, I'll look into this and we'll touch on it next week. Changing my life says self-care takes such consistency. I always find myself falling back. Yes. Yes, it does take consistency. I think it's one of those things that it takes. I think that the more often we do it, the easier it is to become consistent with it. Just because when we start tuning into what we need in that moment, we get better at meeting our needs. I kind of think about my own journey with self-care. Like when oh gosh, really started kind of understanding, even begin just scratching the surface of that term probably 10, 12 years ago. My understanding of self-care was very limited. It was sort of like, okay, take a bubble bath, go for a massage, kind of a thing. Kind of these pampering type things, which those are wonderful. I don't want to discount that at all. But my view and my understanding of self-care was just very limited. And then once it became more expanded of, oh my gosh, there's a whole bunch of different ways that it's important that we engage in self-care, not just on a, once a month kind of basis with a, bubble bath and, or a massage, but on a daily or multiple times throughout the day process. And kind of realizing that was very eye-opening. So, um, yeah, I think kind of the more the more we get used to doing it, and the more we kind of get used to how we feel. The more we get used to feeling a sense of calm, a sense of peace, a sense of enjoyment, where things are just kind of moving smoothly, the more we want that. Like that becomes our new baseline for normal, and we seek that out. And so that works in our favor, because then by default, if we're in situations that are incredibly stressful or crazy making, or there's a lot of mental anguish, or kind of drama and dysfunction and all of this, it's we're more inclined to get some distance from that at a minimum, or to address it sooner than later, because it's like, man, I cannot have this in my life. Like I will not, cannot have this in my life. So something needs to get figured out, because this is just taking up too much of my emotional bandwidth, and this is not what I want. And so then when we kind of make that our new standard of, I want to have, uh, you know, I want to have a level of peace and contentment in my life, then everything else falls into place. So, okay, so let me scroll up here. Okay, scrolling. Oh, I like that. Follow Mistress Nurture says, give yourself 30 days of saying yes to only what energizes you. Yes, love that. Love that. Yes, doing what nourishes you. And maybe that's even the question, kind of asking yourself, okay, what what would be nourishing for me right now? And when I say nourishing, when something truly nourishes us, it's not just in the short term, but it's also in the long term. So, yeah, just kind of some different ways to think about self-care. Adita asks or mentions, says, I have an extreme fear of failure. What's your advice? Like, I'm not a narcissist, but I feel like if I am alone, I will not be happy. I will never be happy without having a long term companion. I just don't feel complete. It's hard to describe. Okay, well, it sounds like that these are kind of two different issues. I think there can definitely be overlap between them. There can be that fear of failing at a relationship, fear of being hurt again, fear of being single, these kinds of things. The fear, the feeling of I will never be happy or I don't feel complete unless I'm with another person. This is kind of a challenge because human beings, we're wired for connection. We're wired to want to be around other people. So that's a very human need to to want to be connected to other people, to be in relationship with other people. Um, with that said, if it's there may or may not be some kind of codependency woven in that. So, uh, if it's that feeling and kind of codependency by definition, it's kind of this excessive emotional reliance on others. So we're if we're looking towards another person to make us feel a certain way, I need to be I need this other person to make me feel whole. I need to be in this relationship in order to feel loved. I need to do, to be in this relationship in order to feel safe. These kinds of things. That's coming more from that sense of codependency and oftentimes some low self-esteem than anything else. But again, I don't want to diminish the fact that it's normal and understandable to want to be in connection with other people and to want to have a significant relationship in your life. Um, but the reality is, it's just having a long-term companion isn't the solution, right? Like, uh, it's finding the right people or the right person in your life that that contributes to that sense of well-being and enjoyment. If our lives are full of the wrong people, that just contributes to a lot of misery and unnecessary stress. So it's important that when we're dating and kind of getting back out into the world, to really focus on being choosy instead of being chosen. And I guess that's a very significant difference. The codependent mindset is one of, oh, I really hope they'll pick me. I want them to choose me. I want them to like me. I don't want to be alone. I need to be in a relationship. It's And so as a result of that thinking of, oh, please, please, please pick me, we tend to twist ourselves into a pretzel, trying to impress them, trying to um, doing a lot of people pleasing, kind of silencing or erasing parts of ourselves that they don't like. So in order to be like, see, look at how much we have in common. Your goals are my goals, and your wants are my wants, and see, I can be anything that you want, kind of a thing. That is codependency. Um, coming from into a relationship from a healthier place is that mindset of, okay, I'm focusing now on being choosy about who I let into my life, and into what degree and for how long. So when we're operating from that mindset of choosiness, it's kind of that attitude of abundance. Whereas the mindset of being chosen, it's that mindset of scarcity. That's the mindset of, if this person doesn't choose me, then there's nobody's going to choose me and I'll just die alone. And so it's a fear-based, anxiety-based way of interacting with other people. The choosy mindset is the realization of, and it's a lot easier to come from this place if we're like, you know what, okay, I've built up a life that I love. I have hobbies and friends and um, different dimension to my life that I really enjoy. And boy, sure, the more the merrier. I would love to have more, um, kind of more of my kind of people in it, and more friends, or a significant other, or whatever that might look like for you. So, but when we have something good going in our life, if our life is something good, then we're not looking to escape from it. We're not looking to we're not looking for a relationship to fix it. We're not looking for a relationship to make us um, feel differently. And so, again, kind of the choosy mindset is like the cake. And so then the relationships are like the icing on the cake. The chosen, like, oh, I really pick me, right? The chosen mindset is uh, where the relationship and everything is the whole cake. Like there's nothing else. So it can be helpful to kind of realize that. Um, okay, let's see. Um, I'm scrolling here. Adita says, uh, okay. I feel like no matter what I do, no matter how much I achieve, I am never enough. And I have narcissistic traits, but not full blown. Um, let's see. I'm fiercely competitive. I can never lose. I have to win. But my own expectations hurt me, probably. My self esteem is sometimes very low, but sometimes very high. Okay, so let's talk about this, because this is such a, um, I think, an important topic to discuss, and maybe one that we don't quite discuss enough on here. And also with that, I just want to say thank you for being willing to share that. I know that's not easy to admit. Like, yeah, you know what? Here's some stuff that's kind of out of balance with me, and that can be embarrassing. So I applaud your bravery with sharing that. So there's a difference between okay, so let's think about self-esteem in terms of, like, there's three types of self-esteem. There's low self-esteem, there's high self-esteem, and then there's inflated self-esteem. So high self-esteem often gets confused for inflated self-esteem. The reality is, in everything that you were saying, that's inflated self-esteem. So inflated self-esteem is when it comes from a place of insecurity, and it comes from uh, that need, where we feel, we feel insecure. And so as a way of compensating for that, we come from a place of, like, PMLity would refer to it as like a power over. So it's that attitude of superiority. It's the kind of the one-upmanship. It's the um, kind of refusal to acknowledge um, our own mistakes or our own flaws. It's the kind of thing, it's that having that, it can be arrogance. It can come across as arrogance, or that having this kind of holier than thou attitude. Um, it's the aggressiveness, it's the competitiveness, like these kinds of things. Um, that, like I said, that's inflated self-esteem. That's that kind of grandiose, and also that kind of comes from that attitude of scarcity. That um, kind of, there can be only one, right? It's the uh, if somebody, and the reality is life isn't a zero sum game like that, where and that's a hard way to live, where it's, if our self-esteem rises and falls based on what other people are doing, or if somebody else quote unquote wins, that's a very difficult way to live. Versus high self-esteem, if you think about it in terms of high self-esteem, it's synonymous with healthy self-esteem, and healthy self-esteem is synonymous with functional self-esteem. And so, okay, so then what is functional self-esteem? Functional self-esteem means that we have an accurate um, perception of our strengths and weaknesses, and kind of our competency to, and our worthiness to set and achieve goals, and to kind of uh, get through the tasks of daily living. Basically, it's kind of how we perceive our competence as a human being, you could basically say. So if we have functional self-esteem, we believe, like I said, we have an accurate understanding of our strengths and weaknesses. So we're like, okay, um, I think that I can, um, I don't know, we might set a goal or multiple goals, and those goals are going to be reasonable and achievable based off of our strengths and weaknesses. So it would be inflated self-esteem if we're setting goals that are not reasonable based off of our previous experience. So, for example, if I were to say, "Oh yeah, I'm going to go out and try out to for the Olympics," I'm going to go try out for the Olympics. Um, yeah, I think I can do it. Why not me, right? Why not me? Why not now? Well, that would be inflated self-esteem. That's very grandiose and it's delusional. Like there's nothing in, um, there's no it's not realistic for me to think that I could go try out for the Olympics and not go anywhere, besides me landing in the hospital from hurting myself. So a person with functional self-esteem is is able to kind of set these reasonable goals. They're able to have the energy and enthusiasm and kind of plan to meeting these goals. They're also, because of this, because their self-esteem is coming from inside, it's not coming from external, the external, other people or winning or losing or things like this. They're able to self-validate. So let's say if my goal was something along the lines of, oh, you know what, I'm going to try this new bread recipe, um, which is actually a real goal. I want to try this new bread recipe. And let's say I do it and it turns out awful. Well, okay, healthy self-esteem or high self-esteem would say, okay, okay, yeah, that did not work out at all. uh, but you know what? We learned what to do for next time. It might need a little less salt. It might need a little longer in the oven. Um, you know, we're going to kind of just tweak it and go along. Low self-esteem would say, "Oh man, I don't even know why I bothered. I should have never even tried that. It's just I'm a terrible cook and I'll never be a good cook. And it's ridiculous." And so then you just kind of give up. So this is why functional self-esteem is so important. Healthy self-esteem is so important because it allows us to self-soothe when things don't go our way, and it allows us to continue to stay realistic of, because that low self-esteem mindset of, oh, you know what, this is never going to work. I don't even know why I tried. I'm just going to throw out all of my baking stuff. That's not realistic. Realistic is very few people, if anybody, starts out at the finish line. Most things are a series of trial and error. And healthy self-esteem understands that. Inflated self-esteem would probably get really upset by the bread not turning out correctly and would seek to deny it. Oh, it's not my fault. It's stupid baking pan, and I knew I should have bought this different one, and it's kind of uh, all of these different oh, it's because you interrupted me when I was mixing the dough. It's your fault. It's kind of everybody else's fault except for their own. So inflated self, and that's the downside to inflated self-esteem, is people with inflated self-esteem are missing out on all of these lessons. They're missing out on that trial and error because their ego is so fragile that they seek to deny accountability and shirk blame. So yeah, it can really help to understand the terminology, to make sure that we're using um, that we have the correct understanding of certain words. Because if we don't, then it creates even further confusion. So okay, so let's see. Um, uh, let's see. Super Silver J asks, how do you fix codependency? Okay, great question. So that involves, um, it really involves reconnecting a person to their self-worth and their power. Um, a lot of, if we look at codependent behavior in terms of, well, I really kind of any type of quote unquote dysfunctional behavior, in terms of dysfunctional messages or dysfunctional beliefs that we've picked up along the way, because that's really what it is. When we, you probably heard me talk about, the saying, when we know different, then we can do different. And that's very, very true. So when, for those many of us that have kind of gotten stuck in codependency, and that's been a big part of our life. It's part nature, it's part nurture. It's part, again, kind of part of our certain personality traits, and then part of our environment, that it was just kind of the perfect storm for this to unfold. But a lot of it has to do with the messages that we've received over time, or the messages that we've perceived. So, and this is the challenge with kind of this, with dysfunctional thinking in general, is we don't, we all perceive information through the lens of who we are at the time and our belief systems at the time. If our belief systems are dysfunctional, we're going to perceive things as dysfunctional. Like, for example, if I, so today I was working on writing the words of encouragement for May, and one of them, and so part of this, and you can subscribe if you'd like to get these by texting the words "I thrive" to the all one word, to the number 22999. So it's tricky because I try to think about all of the different ways that people could uh, like misperceive what I'm saying. And I try to iron that out as much as possible. Because let's say, for example, if I were to say something like, um, um, well, I'll give you an example from earlier in this conversation. Uh, Seek out what nourishes you. Okay. On the surface, that seems pretty, yeah, pretty benign, right? Well, but to a person who has different messages about what's nourishing, they might think, okay, well, my ex nourished me, my abusive ex, that relationship felt really good. I felt really, yeah, it was really bad at times, but man, it was really good at times too. And so that felt nourishing. So um, maybe this is a sign that I should go reconnect with my ex. But whereas a more functional or healthy mindset would, and this is why I was spelling this out earlier, of when something truly nourishes you, it's not just in the short term, it's also in the long term. Um, so in like a healthier mindset, a person's able to realize that. So there's different, I guess what I'm trying to say is there's different shifts in mindset that occur with kind of healing from codependency. There's it's kind of an exploration of boundaries, standards, deal breakers, um, rediscovering our personal power, looking for validation within instead of looking to other people for validation. It's um, kind of breaking free from that people pleasing behavior and realizing, hey, you know what, I've got a say in this. This is my life, and so here are my boundaries with that. Um, yeah, there's quite a bit to it, but it's I think recovery from codependency in many ways, you could say it's about becoming whole. Becoming it's about rediscovering yourself. It's about self-love. It's about self-respect. It's about self-esteem and self-worth and self-compassion and all of the different parts of you, to where you're coming from that place where you're building relationships and engaging with other people from that place of mutuality instead of from a power over or a power under dynamic. It's that sense of, hey, you know what? I matter. My wants and needs matter just as much as yours do. And I don't need to settle for crumbs. I don't need to silence myself. I don't need to to twist myself into a pretzel in order to keep relationships working. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Baby says, I feel like I started out strong and independent and self assured, but I was very effectively trained by a narcissist to become codependent. Mm, yes and no. So I know it can feel like that, but here's the thing. So boundaries, standards, deal breakers, all of this stuff, it's not taught. And unfortunately, or at least it's not taught to the level that it needs to be in order for us to know how to protect ourselves. Uh, and instead, what is taught is a lot of kind of half information or misinformation or really messed up ideas uh, about love, commitment, marriage, relationships, you name it, or incomplete messages where it's they're good, but they're missing context. And so for all those reasons, it's very easy for for anybody to get off track and kind of off balance when when you're like, you might be doing fine, kind of going through life. um you're feeling strong and independent and self-assured until you get around somebody who really pushes your boundaries. So it's one of those things, like, we don't really know how strong our boundaries truly are until they're pushed. And if this stuff was taught and discussed at a much earlier on, I think things would be very different because people would see it coming. But when you know don't see it coming, um, and you kind of it's easy to fall into all these different incomplete messages or mixed messages or toxic messages, and to doubt yourself and to get knocked off balance. I have to sneeze. Hold on. Phew. Ugh. Excuse me. So the the reality is when when we are when we're operating from a place of healthy self-esteem or a place of feeling self-assured, then we're not people aren't able really for any length of time to knock us off base. We might stumble a little bit, but it doesn't last for too long before we're able to right ourselves. So, um, and I think okay, and I just want to clarify too because I think there's this idea out there too that okay, people that get tangled up with abusive people that they're somehow all people pleasers or that kind of this idea of okay this is what like a codependent person is like they're very meek and they're not assertive that they're kind of this proverbial doormat and sometimes they often think oftentimes they are or they do come across that way but sometimes a person can have very let's say porous boundaries or even beyond that codependent spectrum, but they could be like, hey, you know what? No, like, I'm outgoing. Um, speak up for myself. I'm confident. I don't know how I got tangled up in this. And it's the well, and it may or may not be that kind of that excessive emotional investment that we have in another person. I think more often than not, that tends to be what it is. It's this idea of okay, if I'm in this relationship, then I'm in it for the long haul, no matter what, and um, you know, dedicated to making it work, kind of no matter how poorly I'm being treated. Like that's a great example of a very dysfunctional message that we picked up along the way. Like a more functional message to that would be yeah, I warmly welcome really loving, supportive, awesome, inspiring relationships with other people as long as they stay that way. If it goes off the track and I'm being treated um, with contempt, disdain, hostility, if I'm experiencing kind of this mental anguish, perpetual confusion, if issues aren't getting resolved, if effective communication isn't there, and if all of my best efforts, nothing's able to get resolved, then this relationship is crazy making that then something needs to give. I probably need to go. I can't live like this. It's too stressful. So, um, but yeah, and again, this is not to diminish the how easy and subtle and slow those boundary pushes are from a pathological person because they absolutely are. And when you've never experienced that before, it it completely, I mean, it really rattles a person. Sort of, somebody's like, oh well, I don't know, you've got an issue with something or I don't know you let them borrow money and now they're not repaying you and you ask them for money and now they tell you oh what you're greedy or you're unreasonable like I just uh, I can't believe or how dare you like you're so selfish I can't believe you would want me to actually repay you I've done so much for you over the years like these kinds of things if like we're not if we've never encountered that if all we've ever really had in our life is people that were very team oriented and um, we were able to communicate effectively and things ran smooth then that kind of behavior it's it makes a person second guess themselves like well am I making a big deal out of this like am I the problem am I the narcissist am I being unreasonable uh, like I don't know like what's going on here so okay let me scroll up here. Hey, Magaladoro, welcome. He says, hi, Dana, I made it today. Well, we're glad you're here. Bill says, I loved hearing about low, high, and inflated self-esteem. Dana, well, I'm glad. It's It's very helpful, I think, to hear kind of the differences between them, between, uh, I also think it's helpful to think about healthy, because that word trips people up too. Uh, like a healthy relationship, right? Like, well, what does that mean? I mean, is there any such thing as a healthy relationship? Or what is a dysfunctional relationship? So many of the words that we use have this emotional charge to them, and also come along with our kind of preconceived notions about what it is. So, especially thinking of dysfunctional behavior or dysfunctional relationships. So, like when I was talking about codependency a little while ago, it's easy to kind of think about, well, it can be offensive, right? Like, well, what do you mean that's dysfunctional behavior? I thought narcissists, I thought they were dysfunctional. I thought abusive people were dysfunctional. Like, are you saying that I have dysfunctional behavior too? And that can be really, that can feel like victim blaming, and that can feel, really get the hair on the back of your neck standing up. I get it. I was there. I understand. So understanding that there's not judgment, at least for me, from using those words, it's thinking about what they actually mean. So something that's working for you, it's functional. And if it's functional, then hopefully it's also healthy. So if a relationship is dysfunctional, it means it's not working, it's not functioning, which kind of by default means it's not healthy. It's not healthy for you. When a relationship's not working, you're going to have a lot of stress, a lot of frustration, a lot of irritation, a lot of circular conversations, a lot of ineffective communication, a lot of mental anguish. It's exhausting, and there can be fear and all kinds of emotions at play. In a functional relationship, um, issues are going to come up, because that's issues are part of life. Disagreements are going to happen. That is par for the course whenever you have more than one person in the room. Sometimes even you can disagree with yourself. Uh, but disagreements are definitely going to happen when there's more than one person in the room, or in a relationship. So it's how these issues are handled when they do surface that makes the difference. And I should also say it's the kind of the degree and frequency of issues too. Um, so yeah, just some thoughts there. Okay. Bill says, I have been unconsciously choosing vulnerable, narcissistic women for over 40 years. I'm shell shocked. Any advice to deal with the loneliness from abstaining from relationships? Um, yes. So I would encourage you to really seek out and cultivate. Uh, it doesn't have to be a relationship with a woman, but friendships with women or with men, with other people. You've probably heard me talk about the website meetup.com. I'm a huge fan. It can be so much fun, especially if you're in a reasonably populated place of over 10,000 people. There's usually some meetups and stuff going on, and it can be a great way to cultivate new hobbies, to meet new people. It's a very low stakes situation, which I'm a huge fan of. Uh, and people there are there to meet people, so you don't feel like the third wheel. Um, most people at meetups tend to be very welcoming, because they know, hey, and they've been there too. They were once new to the group, and so they tend to extend that friendliness out to others, and so that can really help, um, to uh, to help with that loneliness. It's difficult if we've had that pattern of making a relationship with one person our whole world. And because then when that relationship ends, so does our whole world. And it's just so important to have that added, and not even from a place of like self-protection, but from a place of like life quality and overall life enjoyment. It's helpful to have multiple things going on in your life. Um, and it's also, frankly, it's also more attractive to other people because it's a lot. Kind of nobody wants to be that other person's whole world. That's a lot of pressure. It can feel like it can feel very smothering. So it, it's just kind of more enjoyable to be like, hey, there's, these different things going on, and there are these different interests and different people that I know. And mind you, this is coming, I'm an introvert. So it's not like I'm trying to talk anybody into being an extrovert, but there's, um, even as an introvert, I think it's important that, we cultivate hobbies, cultivate relationships with other people. And Bill says, I prefer women because I'm an empath. Uh, okay. And that could be kind of the challenge there. So what frequently is the case is people that tend to be very high in empathy, um, there's this blurring of boundaries. And so then they're like over relating to the pain and the problems of another person. If there's codependency involved, then it can be this, oh my gosh, let me help you, let me fix you, kind of a thing. So if there's that pattern of, oh boy, I'm finding myself, I'm gravitating towards kind of this baby bird with a broken wing, kind of a thing. On the surface, this person seems so kind of meek and needy, but then you kind of get into it and they're very clingy, they're very controlling, they're um, very demanding, uh, these kinds of things. More often than not, kind of that's why. That's the hook that has you. It's that pull towards the baby bird with a broken wing. And a lot of times that pull is there because we're over relating and over identifying to their pain because we have that same pain or very similar pain within ourselves that we never had healed. So it's coming across of, oh my gosh, I suffered like that. I know what that feels like. And I don't want somebody else to feel that pain too. So let me jump in and fix things for you. And then, it's that analogy of a relationship is like a spinning top. You spin it, and if it's balanced, it'll go round and round and round. If it becomes unbalanced, it starts to wobble. Relationships like that are not coming from that place of mutuality, that are coming from baby bird with a broken wing and, bird rehabilitator, it's an unequal dynamic from the get. And so right away, that relationship is going to be unequal. Finding balance, whatever that's going to look like for you, is going to be vital in order to give it a chance to continue. And how that finding that balance, more often than not, involves boundaries, setting boundaries, and understanding what healthy boundaries, functional boundaries are. So, okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Bill says, "Oh, I am so the caregiver." Ugh. Yeah, and that can be the challenge if here's another side to that too, is if we all have roles we play. Whether we realize it or not, we all have roles we play. Odds are we've been playing these roles since children, since childhood. And over time, these roles become comfortable. It's what we know. So the caregiver is one role. And because that's the role we're comfortable in, that's another part of the reason that more than likely seeking out that baby bird with a broken wing, because it's sort of like, oh, I know what to do here. you know and I like to do it. I like to help. I like to be there for other people. It feels good and it feels comfortable, at least at first. But then you start getting into it, and then that's when things start getting off balance, and it's those feelings of irritation, frustration, resentment. um, you start to sense that imbalance. That's when that starts to happen. So yeah, kind of catching yourself. Breaking that pattern is going to involve catching yourself and thinking about, are you comfortable in relationships with women that don't need to be rescued? Are you comfortable with dating somebody uh, you know that's kind of more of your equal? And if yes, great. If no, then thinking about, okay, well, why not? What's the hesitation there? Sometimes with caregivers, it can be the feeling of, I need to earn love. And if I take care of this person, they're going to be more inclined to stay. I'm going to earn their love. They're going to see how much I do for them, and then they're going to stay. And then, so creating that, or finding out, or creating these more of relationships based on mutuality can feel intimidating and scary, because it's like, well, then what's to keep the person around? If I'm not there, if I'm not there taking care of them, then what use am I? What purpose, what need do I meet? How do I, what, they just give me love for me? Like, that's weird. So like kind of thinking, okay, what's the thinking behind, what's the thinking that's behind this? It can be very eye-opening, and it oftentimes is. So once you kind of get clear on that, the next, and my guess is, here's the thing too, my guess is that it's not just with women that you date that you're like this. Um, there's probably at least a touch of this in your relationships with other people, whether it's family members, coworkers, former coworkers, friends, you name it. If so, it's worth looking at. And then in the future, as you're kind of getting out there and meeting people, or even in the existing friendships or whatnot, um, um, noticing, because it can feel like this knee-jerk reaction. Somebody's in crisis, and then you're like, okay, I'll help, to try to bring some space between that them being in crisis and your response. Try to bring some space, and then be like, okay, I need to not jump in to help them, because let me try to empower them to help themselves. So, because if we're just jumping in and helping other people, then that's the things that they can do for themselves, especially other adults, then it's enabling. It's not actually helping. It's not taking care of them. Um, or I should say, it's not giving care to them. It's taking care of them. And that's, again, a no-win situation. It breeds resentment and frustration on both ends. So, Couch Multiplayer, thank you for the live stream donation. He says, I bounced from narcissistic woman to narcissistic woman for years. Now I've met my soulmate. We are both trustworthy empaths and caring people. What's even funnier is my narcissistic mother doesn't like that me and my missus get on and love each other so much. She even tried to break us up. Well, I'm glad that you have met a trustworthy, empathetic, and caring woman, and that you feel that you have this deep connection to her. And I hope that relationship is unfolds unfolds nicely for you. Sounds like you have a lot of life experience under your belt with, we'll call them difficult people, including your mom, it sounds like. So it it sounds like you have a lot of experience with kind of what not to do and what you're not looking for. So by the benefit to that is kind of by default, you know what kind of relationship you do want to have. So I hope that that works well for you. And again, thank you. That's it's very generous. Um, yeah, that's another big red flag. Okay, let me scroll up here. I'm hopping into the middle of a conversation here. Bill says, I'm going to take another 6 months off because I become the codependent person and protector. Yeah. I- And I guess I also really kind of I think that's great. And it's always good if we realize, oh my gosh, you know what? I've been kind of subconsciously or unconsciously running this kind of maladaptive pattern in my life. I think I just need to bench myself. I just need to bench myself for a handful of months and just breathe and regroup, and then before I get back out there. That's that's great, and I think that's important. However, I guess I just kind of want to reiterate the importance of it's because this dynamic feels so comfortable that it's a lot, well, I would say the vast majority of it, it's within us. So it's not just avoiding um, people in need, or that, yeah, kind of the baby bird with a broken wing. It's not just avoiding people that need help. It's about having boundaries. Because if we have that caregiver, that overgiver uh, trait within us, and that's what's comfortable for us, and I speak from experience on this. It's like, it's no matter how healthy the other person is, if we still have this bend in our personality that's unknowingly driving our behavior, then that imbalance still has the potential to be there. So we have to monitor our own behavior and be able to kind of put some checks and balances in place of, oh, you know what, there it is again. Just wanted to jump right in and help out this other person, or kind of over giving, um, and and being able to pull back. Pulling back is going to be uncomfortable. I will just warn you on that. It's going to take some doing, and sometimes you might find that because it is such a knee-jerk response, that you're kind of overcommitting yourself to things before you think them through, or you're over offering because you just want to help that other person. It's like, I just want, I just want to help you. And then signing yourself up for stuff. And then you're like, and then later on the road, you're like, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Like, when am I going to have the time or the energy or the money or any resources to be able to do this? So sometimes it might involve uh, kind of having uncomfortable conversations where if you say yes when you really should have said no, um, to then kind of circle back around to that person and say, you know what, I know I said I could do this, but the more thought I give, I can't. Um, I'm sorry, or whatever. So it's you doing as much as you can to maintain that balance, and not just looking to the other, not looking or waiting around for another person who's um, completely healthy. Does that make sense? Not looking for them to provide all the balance, I guess is what I'm saying. Being able to provide it on your own. Okay. So let me scroll up here. Refiner Morgan, hello, is here and says, I can relate from the other side of the coin, being a female empath and attracting narcissistic men. So I had to develop a first alert red flag warning system that filters out a lot of narcissists so I don't allow myself to be trapped anymore. And let's see, let me scroll here. MJW says, I'm a female empath who seems to attract narcissistic men. I'd love to hear how you find the red flags so early on. And Refiner Morgan says, one of the first red flags is that the narcissist pushes for marriage before there's even a relationship. Yeah, that's a good one. You know, there's lots of red flags. I have a red flag series. I will say, I think probably the most helpful piece of advice I can give, well, and it's so challenging because there's two ways to look at red flags. It's one is from kind of that top down approach, and one is from a bottom up approach. The top down approach, it can feel, and it oftentimes is, it's like playing that game whack-a-mole. If you remember Showbiz Pizza or Chuck E. Cheese, where the mole would pop up and you have that padded whacker thing and you knock it on its head and it goes back down. When we're dealing with certain signs, it can feel like that, because the reality is every problematic person comes across different. Um, you've just like any like scammers, online scammers come across different. Yeah, there's some repeating themes in what they do, just like there's repeating themes with problematic people, but it all can come across a little different. You know, like for example, with online dating scammers, um, you know, it used to be that they would ask, they would move pretty quick. There was a lot of love bombing, telling you everything that you'd want to hear, and then they'd ask for money. And at least as of, gosh, 5, 6 years ago, one of the things that they were doing is they were also kind of quick to pay lots of attention and give a lot of affection, do a lot of that love bombing. But then what they were doing is they switched up the game, and they were sending people like a long stem red rose and like a little box of chocolates. And since that doesn't match the pattern, or what was thought to be the pattern at the time of like, well, if they were a scammer, they wouldn't do that, right? Like, don't they just ask for money? Like, they're not going to spend their own money. And that was the way that they would disarm other people, because it was sort of like, well, maybe this is legit. And then down the road, once they kind of built up your trust, then they'd ask for money. So it's kind of the same thing with abusive people. Sometimes, you know, sometimes they yell, or they're very critical or demanding or intimidating, and sometimes they're not. Sometimes they can come across as really likable, really friendly. Um, Sometimes animals love them. Um, you know, it so, but the one commonality with problematic people is they have problematic behavior. So if you can get in tune with kind of where your boundaries are, and understanding when something is or isn't a problem for you, that's going to take you like 90 something percent of the way home. Like, that'll keep you safe. So it's when we start second guessing ourselves, or fearing, like, oh, I don't want to miss out on a good person. What if I'm making too big of a deal out of things? You know, this, that, and the other. That's when we start getting into troubled water. But um, you know, problematic people, they don't um, sincerely respect boundaries. So they oftentimes do a lot of boundary pushes. If not at first, they eventually do, but oftentimes they do it first. So you say you've got to be in bed by 9:30. they are calling you at 11. You say you want to go, um, I don't know. You don't want to go to a certain restaurant, you end up going to a restaurant. You say that you don't want to, that you're not going to, that you don't drink alcohol, they order you a drink anyhow. Like these kinds of things. They might start kind of hinting at, oh, hey, being flirty, calling pet names, or wanting to see sexy pictures, or um, kind of like, oh, hey, how about you come over here and I'll cook you dinner, stuff like that, kind of alluding at sex. Well, if you're not into that, if you're like, no, I'm not. I mean, if you're into that, then that's fine. But if you're not into that, then kind of, uh, if something's not sitting right with you, because generally that kind of stuff feels a little forward, because it is, because it's hinting at that, it's hinting at having sex early on. So, okay, let me scroll up here. Um, Refiner was saying, yeah, I've been wanting to get into your red flag warning series. Yeah, really, I think that the biggest, in my opinion, the thing that's the most helpful with that series is it's validating. So it really goes back to each person as an individual. We know at the core of what sits right with you and what's uncomfortable. It's it's when we start trying to justify that, or when we start uh, turning to other people and asking their opinion, that's when we get into troubled waters. We're like, gosh, it's really weird. This guy, I'd made it really clear, like I'm not looking for anything casual, and he was signing all of his text messages XXX, like, hey babe, how about you come over here and I'll cook you dinner. It just felt off to me. And if I go ask a friend, hey, do you think it's weird? And I don't know why people do this. I'm sure I've done it too. It's I don't know. I don't know if it's we want like we want our friend to or the one we care about to get, I don't know, to just be okay. But it's so weird. People oftentimes will justify what their um kind of their friend is experiencing. So if I was like, God, this is really weird. I just it feels off to me. A lot of times friends will be like, oh, well, you know, maybe it's his culture, or maybe he didn't mean it that way, or I think you're reading too much into it, or maybe it's due to your past. Not everybody's like your ex. And all of these things, or that's just how people are these days with dating. Like it's totally no big deal. Like you're making a big deal out of nothing. It's very easy to get knocked off balance by well-intended people. So this is why it's so important to be able to validate yourself and be like, you know what? I just am not okay with that. And then it's up to you to, in my opinion, in that situation, I would block, delete, and then drive on. I wouldn't even bother going back to them and asserting myself and saying, hey, you know what? I don't like being called pet names. I don't like you're signing text messages XXX. We haven't even met. I don't like that you offered to make me dinner at your house. That's not comfortable. And the reason I say that I wouldn't assert myself in a situation like that is because if that person has any um, sliver of emotional intelligence, it gives them room to backtrack and then pivot and be like, oh, I'm so sorry, I'm just a very romantic person, I didn't mean anything by it, and you know da 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 da. And it just gets you further into that manipulation. So if somebody is acting inappropriate right out of the gate, they know better. So like they know what they're looking for, and don't give them an opportunity to change up the game. So the, I would just walk away in situations like that. If it's, um, yeah, yeah, um, yeah. And everybody's kind of got their own deal breakers, their own standards when it comes to that. And like I said, it can be very easy to get knocked off balance by other people who might just, I see this stuff. If you've ever watched the show 90 Day Fiance, you see this a lot. And I hope that it's just the show. Well, I guess you see two things. Sometimes you see people justifying like very on the nose, like low hanging fruit, obviously problematic behavior, you know, where it's like this person's obvious, pretty clearly interested in the green card and or citizenship. That's it. And the person's in denial. They really want to believe that this person, who's 30 years younger than them, who's uh, they have nothing in common with, would actually be in love with them, kind of a thing. And sometimes you get family and friends. They're like, "What are you, nuts? Come on, wake up, snap out of it." And then other times you get family and friends that justify it. And so this is why it's turning inward and being able to think for yourself. Magalodoro asks, is there any way to show that I'm genuine on an online dating site, assuming I become brave enough and sign up for one? Um, I think kind of some of the best ways to signal genuineness is to have genuine photos of yourself, not like the glamour shots, super sexy poses, but um, pictures that are realistic, pictures that are a genuine reflection of who you are, and that kind of show you out there living your life, and show kind of what you're about. If you're into camping or hiking or um, I don't even know, video games or whatever it might be, pictures of you doing these things. I will say, as a woman, it's a real turnoff when a guy only has a series of selfies in the bathroom mirror, or there's just selfies with him in various states of undress. Like, that's just, it's low effort, and it's a huge turnoff. So it's also a huge turnoff when somebody has kind of these, highly filtered, photoshopped kind of, face shots on their dating profile. It's um, you know so yeah. And then think, kind of putting in the profile, um, kind of some things that make you you, and some of the things that you're looking for in somebody else. So yeah, it oftentimes takes a few versions. You might want to have a friend look it over and see. It can be hard. It can be hard for any of us to kind of to have that kind of neutral perspective of how we're coming across. Like, how we think we come across and how we actually come across tend to be two different things. This is where a good friend can help to to kind of be a second set of eyes. Couch multiplayer. Also, thank you for the live stream again. Donation. He says, can a covert mother suddenly get worse or more noticeable once an overt dad recently died, even if they've been split up for 10 plus years? It could be. I guess I would wonder, is her behavior, do you think her behavior is due to her ex-husband, to his death? I think it just depends on the dynamic of the relationship, but I mean, anybody's behavior can kind of change for any number of reasons. Um, it would depend. For her behavior to get worse, if there were still feelings there, if there was still some sense of like that family dynamic going, um, death death changes families. It changes the whole family dynamic. A person, if one person was kind of the matriarch or the patriarch of the group and they die, then everybody, then things are just reshuffled. And it's sort of like, okay, well now what are the roles that we're supposed to play? Because these were the roles that we all kind of played before, but we kind of played them because of this person. Like, I don't know, we were all like, for example, in my family, there were a lot of people that were kind of, I don't know, pretended to be Catholic, but pre- pretended to be Catholic pretty much. They would go to mass, they were getting married in the church, they were doing all of these Catholic things, but it was for my grandmother. It wasn't for them. And the dynamic between her sons changed after she died. So these kinds of things happen in a family, even if there's divorce present. It just depends on how involved they still were in each other's lives, or if there was kind of unresolved stuff that was going on. Um, yeah, lot, so many different factors at play there. Let's see. Let me. Oh, good. Magladora says, "Thanks, Dana. I have a friend I can ask about dating profile." Good deal. Yeah, that's a great way to go about it. And I will, I just would encourage you. Dating is, it's kind of like jumping into a rock tumbler. Like, it's, it can be challenging, and you kind of just don't really know where you're going to end up. But I would encourage you to kind of to manage your expectations, and to try to go into it with, um, an attitude of curiosity, and uh, like, okay, you know what, you just never know who you're going to meet, and that's okay. It's when we kind of build things up to such a point of where there's a really high expectation, especially with online dating. If you're spending a lot of time talking, or skyping or zooming or whatever it is, and before you meet, it's going to make things a lot more awkward when you do actually meet in person, because there's been so much that's been built up. So trying to meet in person sooner than later, I think, is a good way to go about it. And then just realizing, you know what, okay, if um, hopefully getting to the place where you have the self-esteem, where you realize, okay, you know what, I know what I bring to the table. Because the thing is, dating is all about rejection. And so we have to have our self-esteem at a certain level in order to really handle that. So I would encourage you, if you do get out there, it can feel defeating, where you're like, man, I've gone out with, a handful of women, none of them are really what I'm looking for. To just realize it's a numbers game, especially with online dating. It's a numbers game. And um, try to keep things light, and try to keep things enjoyable, and to not internalize it. And if you meet some real duds out there, if any, it's the general public. You just kind of never know what you're going to get. If you meet some harsh people out there, if you experience rejection, um, just realize it's important to keep your hurt feelings and your self-worth in two different buckets. So those hurt feelings aren't spilling over to where you're internalizing it, where you're able to realize, okay, you know what? I wasn't for them. Instead of thinking, oh, there's something wrong with me. It doesn't have to mean, we don't have to give the opinions of other people that much power. So I guess I would just encourage you to know that going forward. Um, let's see. Let me. Miss Moon Grable says, "Oh my God, I love this topic. Dating is rough. It's like the dating culture now is frustrating." Yeah, it really is. It's changed a lot, even in the past couple years. And it's, we were talking about this, I think, last time. Kind of one of the challenges, or one of the things that I've noticed with online dating in particular, is that it's becoming more and more uh, commonplace for people. I think this is, well, I think right now it's more men towards women, but that can change. But where there's kind of this whole like nice guy, quote unquote nice guy trope, where kind of out of the blue, if there's any type of rejection, it's becoming more and more normal that the guy will just completely go on this tirade and lash out and become very verbally and emotionally abusive. So just kind of a heads up out there that that's becoming more and more commonplace, and to again, keep your self-worth and your hurt feelings in two different buckets, because that kind of stuff can really rattle a person. Okay, let me scroll down here. This is to one of the reasons I'm more of a fan of meetup.com. It's uh, and again, a little different because of COVID, pandemic stuff. There's meetups probably not as prevalent as they were a year and a half, 2 years ago, but it can be more of an authentic way of meeting people, and it's there's no expectation. So Magalodoro, kind of depending on your area. I know you were saying you had bad experience with it, um, and this is one of the things too is it's the general public, so it's very hit or miss. I encourage people to sign up for like half a dozen different meetups and try some, because that hopefully you're doing something that you already like. So like if you really like hiking, for example, and you sign up for a hiking meetup group where it's a group of people that all go hiking, then you're still getting a good hike in. And at the end of the day, you might have maybe you connect with one other person. And it might not be somebody that you would consider dating, but you might make a friend. And that, you know, who doesn't like making friends? So it's that can be a lot smoother and a lot less scary of an experience than online dating, where you really don't know. Okay, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Magalodora says, "Well, technically, Dana, there is something wrong with me. I have a disability." Okay, I don't want to sound all Pollyanna sunshine here, but I think, I guess the way I look at it, I wouldn't say that there's something wrong with you. There's differences about you, but that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. That's my take on it. So, and I think that's kind of an important take. And kind of something important to think about, because if we're going into these situations thinking like, gosh, you know what, there's something wrong with me, then we're already entering that dynamic from a place of that power under, of this other person's kind of doing me a favor, right? Because there's something wrong with me. So whoever's interested in me, well, either there's something wrong with them, or they're kind of doing this act of kindness by wanting to spend time with me, and neither one are necessarily true. So it at a minimum, I think it's really important that you see what you bring to the table. And there's lots of different, disabilities and differences that people have. Some are more visible than others, but that doesn't make somebody wrong. It just makes them different. And I think kind of the key to, or one of the keys to like a happy, healthy relationship is understanding each other's differences and accepting each other for those differences, you know? So, okay. Let's see here. Let me, Maglador is saying, oh, wait, I shouldn't talk online first. No, no, you absolutely can. I wouldn't, if you find somebody that you click with online dating, uh, in order to value your time and your emotions and your energy, I wouldn't spend lots and lots of time engaging with them, talking with them online, because you kind of there's that line there. You want to see if there's enough of a connection in order to actually meet. That's the goal. That's the goal. Is just, is there enough of a connection for us to meet? If there's not, then you guys drive on. But it's very difficult if the relationship is staying online, where you're zooming, you're Skype, you're FaceTiming, you're doing all these things, you're texting, you're calling, but you're not actually meeting. Because I'll tell you, there's different types of chemistry out there. A person can have really, they can be really quick thinking or really expressive on paper and write fantastic emails. And you can have this amazing connection with them through email or through text, or I should say through email. And then you start texting, and then that connection might not be there. Or the you get on the phone, and then you kind of realize, oh my gosh, this chemistry is not there. Or you get on FaceTime, and so there's a lot of different ways that we connect with other people. Kind of uh, one way that will, I guess, to really see is to meet them in person. You're just going to get a more complete picture of when you meet a person in person. It's way too easy for our brain to fill in the gaps of what it thinks about this person. It's way too easy to make assumptions. It off of a dating profile, off of like kind of limited time. This is why I was saying it's important to value your emotions and value your time. So if you sense, okay, this, I really liked what they said in their profile. I liked how they wrote it. I liked their, pictures, their interests, these kinds of things. I think there's enough potential there for us to just get a cup of coffee or to grab a beer. That's what you're going for. Then just go do that. It's a um, casual thing, 45 minutes to an hour. You guys can always stay later if you want, but then that way there's no pressure. And if they ask, kind of letting them know, um, you know what, how about kind of no pressure. Let's just meet and see if, you know, and see if there's any type of connection. And, buy a cup of coffee and or buy a beer and we'll go from there. No pressure. So, but yeah, there's a lot of people out there that are with online dating. Um, I think especially the older a person gets, they're not, there's just so many predatory people out there. Like there really are people that are married that are looking to cheat, that are in a relationship looking to cheat, that are uh, kind of, it's just so easy to create a fake profile to lure other people. So this is why it's important to guard your emotions and guard your time, and um, kind of proceed with caution, and err on the side of caution with kind of these things. So, um, Magalodora says dating is terrifying. You know, it can be. It can be very anxiety inducing. But it's also it's kind of a skill and it takes practice. And I think one of the biggest tips I can give you is um, yeah, at least for the first date, the goal of the first date is just to get to the second date. If there's a connection, the goal of the first date isn't to wow the other person or to get them to fall in love with you. It doesn't have to. It really shouldn't be like that intense. The goal of the first date is just to see if there's enough of a connection to get to the second date. And um, one of the things that I think both men and women tend to find very attractive is somebody who's comfortable with themselves, who's just comfortable. And so coming from a place of being calm, of being relaxed, of being able to kind of laugh at the stressfulness of a first date and how awkward things can be. And um, you don't need to wow them. You don't need to uh, just kind of getting comfortable with yourself, strengths and weaknesses, uh, you know, all the different parts of you, just getting comfortable with yourself and bringing that comfort to the table. Um, let's see here. That's a good tip. Jennifer says doing a reverse image search on their profile picture is a good way to make sure they don't have a fake profile. Yeah. Yeah, it's a good to Google them, taking the time, Google their name. Like you said, doing a reverse image search on Google, seeing what shows up, kind of looking at their social media profiles. It's amazing. It's amazing the stuff that's floating around out there about other people. Sometimes, that'll tell you all you need to know. Like if you spend some time online. Let's see here. Let me scroll. Hmm. That's a really great attitude and mindset to have, Miss Moon Grable. She says, I just started doing me, what I love to do, going places within reason, doing Zooms and actual places that I love, and chasing my happiness. Having fun dating is my main goal. It's just having fun. Yes. So th- I think that's a wonderful mindset to have. That's the difference I was talking earlier about the kind of when we're coming from that place of abundance of yes, here's all these different things I have going on, like I'm building up a life that I love. That that's attractive. Other people are like, oh wow, uh, this person's so interesting. They're look at all the stuff that they have, or the things that they're interested. They have a life, right? Look at the things that they're interested in, and it's also not that this amount of pressure of they've got nothing going on, and that you're going to make this other person your whole world, because that's a turn off for a lot of people, and a turn on for a lot of the wrong people. So. Um, living your life and having fun kind of and by default you're going to find other people that are doing the exact same thing, and then that's when the magic starts to happen, because then you're like, okay, yeah, here I am kind of living my best life and cultivating hobbies and doing things with friends and doing this stuff, and then it just becomes more of a natural way of meeting other like-minded people potentially, uh, a life partner. And it's nice because, um, they have similar interests and, uh, yeah. So it just is a more natural way of kind of growing something. S. Ray asks, is it normal to feel like you've literally lost a part of yourself after a traumatic relationship, as if you will never be the same again? Yes, I think that is more common than not. I know I experienced that, and I think a lot of people here have as well. Um, y- I'll tell you a realization that I had that really helped me overcome that. For a long time, I was kind of stuck in that, thinking, I just want to be healed. I just want to be healed. And at the time, my idea of healing was returning to the way that I was. That's what I was thinking, what it meant to be healed. And because that wasn't happening, I kept thinking, well, there's just something wrong. I guess I'm going to be forever broken because I'm not able to return to the person that I once was. And I don't know, I don't remember kind of when or how even that I made this shift. But then I realized at some point, um, that life is always about moving forward. Life is about growth. It's never about going backwards. And that understanding really set me free because it made me realize that healing isn't about returning to who you once were. It's about kind of it's about rebuilding yourself, and it's about kind of creating this person that you want to be. So that made me feel a lot better because it's like we can't we every single person we're if we're not changed by, we're at least heavily influenced by all of the different situations and relationships and experiences in our life. And I think it was Maya Angelou who said something like, these experiences in our lives uh, um, might change us, but they don't have to diminish us. And that's very, very true. So we might have gone through an incredibly traumatic relationship, but we don't have to let that reduce us. And I think the way we go about that is, uh, okay, so here's something else I realized. It's like this is first we make the declaration of that we're not going to end our lives over this. So if you're feeling suicidal, just kind of telling yourself, okay, I'm just taking that option off the table. I'm not going to end my life over this. The second declaration is, okay, I'm not going to ruin my life over this. Like, I'm not going to let this ruin my life. That one was a little bit more difficult for me at first because I felt like my life was ruined. And I kind of felt like that I was just going to have to kind of go through life being profoundly broken. And while everybody else seemed to be living a good life, and I was just going to kind of, stumble through. And that's not the case. So realizing that you don't that we get to choose. You don't have to let this ruin your life. That's really powerful. That's a decision that you can make. So then you might be wondering, well, how do I not let this ruin my life because I feel like my life is ruined? This comes to the third point, which is making that declaration of taking what happened to you and using it for your highest and greatest good. You don't need to know exactly how, and it doesn't have to be just in big ways. And I would encourage you to think about it in terms of big and little ways. Using this for your highest and greatest good. What can that look like? In terms of abuse, it might be, wow, I really saw, um, kind of the power of words. And I never want, um, I never want somebody to feel like that again. Like I will never treat another person like that. Or um, it can kind of encourage a person or give them that motivation to be a better parent, a better friend, to volunteer, to um, to kind of become like your highest and best version of yourself. Here I was around this really controlling person who kind of just wanted to keep me in this little box. And now that I'm out of it, I don't want to be controlled. I want to have my autonomy. I want to be able to express myself. Um, so all of following that train of thought, like those are all ways that that you can use what happened to you towards your highest and greatest good. And then in time, step 4 is using what happened to you for the highest and greatest good of others. And that's really powerful. So that is where um, kind of giving that kindness or that understanding or that compassion or volunteering or um, even a smile or a hug to a person who seems to be struggling. Um, all of these things can work for the highest and greatest good of others. And then that, I think, is really, it kind of gives our pain a purpose. So so I think just in part realizing that we don't have to just stay broken, um, that we can rebuild. And that's the beauty. I mean, our life, like we are the author of our life, and we live life in chapters, whether we realize it or not. And so you get to decide, for the most part, what's involved in the different chapters, and when you start a chapter and when you finish a chapter, and who is involved in the chapters, and kind of the characters and the supporting characters and the lessons, the main character you learn, and the kind of different adventures you go on and all of that. So sometimes I think it can help realizing that life is lived in chapters. It's not just this long stretch. If we're lucky, it's not this 95-year stretch of time. It's broken up into chapters. So I hope that helps. Oh, good, Bonnie. I'm glad. She says this is an awesome live stream. It's amazing. Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad to hear that. Um, well, Magalodora, I hope you keep us posted. We wish you well on that adventure. He says, thank you for all the advice today. I really appreciate it. I think I'm going to give online dating a try. Well, good luck. And like I said, please, if you're comfortable, keep us posted. Yeah, Magalodora saying too says that's exactly how I feel, broken, and everyone else is okay. Yeah, I can absolutely relate to that. And that's the mm, kind of the lie of trauma. That trauma tells us you're different, you're broken, nobody else understands, you're alone in this. And none of that's true. None of that's true. I can so relate to that. I remember a handful of years ago feeling like that I was it was like I felt like a moth trapped on the other side of the glass, and everybody was inside and warm and happy and all of these great connections and everything, and I was so trying so desperately to get inside, get into that warmth, and I just I couldn't. And it was s- such a uh like just such a difficult time. But the reality is that trauma is traumatic experiences, if it's not necessarily the same trauma, but traumatic experiences in general, it's a part of the human process, and the human experience. Like if we live long enough, we're going to experience probably a handful of trauma in our life, and each time it it feels that way. It feels like a bomb went off in your life, and oh my gosh, I feel so profoundly different from everyone around me that nobody understands, and I just kind of feel like maybe I should just be alone. This is why I think it's so important to to get into a support group at a minimum, in a support group, because there's not only that sense of community, but then there's also that sense of that validation and hearing from the experiences of other people, no matter what kind of trauma you've experienced. It could be from cancer, or from the death of a loved one, or from um, um, gosh, from an abusive relationship, or any number of things. Uh, hearing the experiences of other people is so powerful, because it brings to light so many things that you're like, oh, I never really thought about that before, or I never thought about it that way before, or it's just you benefit from the insights of others, and you can also contribute by sharing your own insights, because that's kind of the thing too with trauma is it can be easy to think, well, everybody else has this all figured out, so then we think any insights that we have ours are just ours alone, but in reality they might be life changing for another person. And so then that's another great way to kind of steer into that step 4 of using our the pain of our experiences for the highest and greatest good of others. Is oftentimes people can benefit from hearing like, oh, okay, well, you know what, here was kind of my experience, here were some of the lessons that I learned, and um, yeah, here were some of my challenges. It can shave years off of the learning curve for another person. So yeah, lots of benefit to different support groups. Bonnie says, yes, we can still grow no matter how old we are. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Lisa says, this has been an incredible gathering. Much good wisdom, goodwill, great pilgrim souls. Everyone here is my hero. Oh, that's thank you for that. That's beautiful and powerful. I would agree. Everyone here is my hero too. It's a really neat little corner of the internet that we have, and it's awesome to see so many people just supporting each other week after week. It's really cool. So, okay, let's see. Let me scroll. Um, And Huffle Mom. Oh, yeah, I love that concept. She's talking about the concept of kintsugi. She says, "Do you know what the Japanese like to do with broken things? They put them back together with gold and all of the cracks, and they go from something broken to a unique work of art." Yes. I just think that's such a powerful concept, isn't it? The kind of repairing things with gold. It makes them more valuable and it really kind of accentuates their uniqueness. That was the inspiration for this painting that I did back here, but now it looks more like stained glass. But that's how it started. It was kind of the kintsugi concept, and it took a left turn. But yeah, I call this painting. I realized the title of it. I don't know. The other day is it's. I'm just going to call it life. That's it. It's life. It's crazy, different, different shapes, different sizes, different colors. It's kind of just this, all of these different experiences, and individually, they can be jagged, they can be sharp, they can be big, they can be, uh, bright colored, they can be really dark. They there's such a range, but when you put it all together, it makes this, it's a unique piece it's all its own. And that's, I don't know, it's kind of, that's what life is, right? Changing my life says, "Yay for new chapters. Some parts of my life just need to be a closed book." Yeah, I hear you. And it is really powerful to realize that it can sometimes be mixed emotions, like it can be a little painful to close a chapter, but sometimes it's much needed. And there can be kind of this catharsis, or like this releasing of, okay, and now this chapter's closed, and kind of on and on to the next one. Oh, I love that. Helpful Mom says, "I repair myself with gold every time I remember to value myself." That is such a beautiful way to say that. Yes. Oh, I love that. Oh, is that what that was? Megalodon says, "Those Discord messages were from me." Is that the chirping that I'm hearing in the background? I just installed Discord like, oh, I don't know, a week or two ago, and I'm still trying to figure it out. So I was wondering what that sound was. Oh, technology. Uh, let's see. Let me. Okay, yeah, Maglodora says that. Yeah, those are my messages that you're hearing. Okay, well, yeah, mystery solved. Jennifer says, "I don't know why, but it's so hard for me to let go of people, even if they're abusive. I'm not sure why. It's like I get stuck in the past or something." Well, that could be. I think that's actually probably pretty insightful. So, I don't know if you're familiar with attachment styles. There's a great book that I don't think we haven't made it a part of book club yet. I'll have to check the list because it needs to be. because it's a great book. It's called Attached, and it's about different attachment styles. It really spells out uh, w- the all of the attachment styles really well. And the anxious style of attachment is the one that really struggles to let people go. And that's exactly that. It tends to attachment styles tend to be like formed in childhood. It's a mix of nature and nurture, but then they there's they can change throughout our lives. They're, at a minimum, they're impacted by relationships mainly, kind of throughout our life. It helps to know what attachment style you have, and you kind of get a pretty good idea. Like if you're reading the list, you're like, "Ooh, yeah, that's describing me." Then you know. Um, so then the good news is kind of once you're aware of, okay, yeah, this is this attachment style that I have, then you can work on, okay, how do I find balance with that to where it's not unconsciously driving my behavior or my dynamics with other people. So yeah, we'll have to see. We'll have to see when that book is up for book club. Oh, very cool. Hi. Hi says, Dana, what if I tell you I painted a similar painting with kintsugi in mind as a way to put all of the pieces together again from trauma? Wow, it came out during my art therapy. That is so cool. That is so cool. I are you still in art therapy? And if so, are you liking it? Uh, yeah, I've heard I've never personally done art therapy. I've heard wonderful things about it. It makes complete sense to me as to how and why it could be powerful. JG says, "Do you ever get burned out talking about the same topic?" Mm, no, no, I don't really. Speaking of which, on the what was it? The 19th was my 6-year YouTube anniversary. If you can believe it, that's really wild to think about. Um, I no, I don't get burned out. I think if anything, I kind of get more excited each time I talk about it because I feel like that's well, I think for starters, I've always really enjoyed kind of self-help topics like psychology and life and you know navel gazing, like trying to figure it all out. And also, I get yeah, I guess I've always just been kind of fascinated by the human experience, and it's really enjoyable to talk about different lessons learned and to hear lessons learned from other people and the questions that other people ask that are worded maybe and they're worded slightly different, and so it kind of gets me thinking about a topic in a fresh new way that I would have probably never thought of had they not asked that question. And then it's really great in the chat because then it's kind of sparks off these different conversations that tend to take on a life of their own, which um, you know is interesting. So yeah, I think it's all interesting. I mentioned in one of my earliest videos, I'm so not a fan of small talk, and so I really love deep dive topics like this, and it's really cool if to be able to talk about this stuff and um and then for somebody to say, oh wow, I what you said really resonated with me, or what somebody else in the chat said, man, that was a game changer. Like that's just that juices me. It's sort of like that's so cool, you know. So yeah. Oh boy. Couch Multiplayer says, "Hey, can you recommend any movies to watch that have narcissists in them? This month I saw Carrie." Yes, so that's a good one. The mom in that, yeah. Disney's Tangled, Sopranos seasons 1 and 2, and It Could Happen to You. Breaking Bad as quite a few. Um, Great show, by the way, as well. What are some other shows that have hmm, sometimes there's true crime stories. There's a channel that it's a true crime story on YouTube. The host is really entertaining. I really enjoy him. I would watch anything he did. It's this channel's called That Chapter, and the guy has I want to say it's Irish or Scott. I should know the difference. I don't. I think it's Irish accent, which is always kind of fun, you know. Um, but kind of hearing the way that these I don't know, hearing the way those stories unfold can kind of expand a person's horizon in terms of uh, what we think a problematic person looks like or acts like, or it kind of it expands our horizons, or it makes us more aware of our hidden biases, I guess, of kind of who can be the victim of a crime and who can be the perpetrator of a crime. So but at the same time, that kind of stuff too, if you're or especially if you're already feeling anxious, uh, it's going to add fuel to your anxiety. So it's definitely not worth it. Frankly, I think your time best spent is watching shows that focus kind of more on um, healthy dynamics between people. The only show that I've seen lately that comes to mind that I think really has done this well, at least so far, has been the show This Is Us. I think they do a really good job of showing functional boundaries with kind of real life, more difficult situations and people that do it imperfectly. So that's kind of I wish there was more out there in terms of healthier stuff to watch. Um, JG says, I don't think Breaking Bad is a good example. I love the show and I can honestly see Walter White's point of view. He was just trying to help his family. LOL. Yeah, okay. I don't want to give it away if anybody hasn't seen it. The writers of that show did such a great job with that because and I would agree, but there was a point where it turned and I would say his primary motivation wasn't to help his family. It was, you know, it was to feed his ego. Because you'd think here was a guy who, uh, it was brilliant, and he was working a job. Students didn't care. Kind of other faculty really didn't care. He was burned out and he wasn't feeling fulfilled at work. And his former business partner was kind of living the dream, right? This really fulfilling job, this wonderful marriage, kind of had it all. And so there was this vulnerability in his ego of needing to prove something kind of to himself, to other people, wanting to be more like that. Really, it started off with good intention, but then it really took a turn. uh, I was actually thinking not so much even of Walter White. I was thinking more of the character of Gus and his the you know the way his character turns. I think he's a great example of more of that kind of cool, calm, collected, psychopath, a lot of very psychopathic behavior. Oh, what did I? Okay, sorry. I just hit a button and my computer went wonky, but I'm back. Let's see here. I'm scrolling. Magladora mentions the movie Gone Girl. You know, I've tried to watch that movie, I want to say like 2 or 3 times now, and I just could not get into it. And a lot of people have mentioned it over time, and I couldn't. But yeah, I've heard I've heard it's good. Let's see. Oh, Ellen was mentioning the show Dirty John. Yeah. Uh, let's see. Let me scroll up here. Hi says, oh, yes, my natural creativity got stunted after narcissistic abuse. I needed to find a way back to feeling free and expressing myself again. So the art therapy really helped me. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I love that. I wish there was a way that you could upload pictures into the chat because I'd love to see some of the stuff that you've done. Magladora asks, "Are you a?" This is life and navel gazing. Are you a Douglas Adams fan? I have never heard of Douglas Adams, but now I feel like I need to look this person up. Let's see. Oh, I've heard of Douglas Adams, the writer of the author of the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Great book. Great book. Um, I'm a fan of the book. I haven't really thought much about the book since probably when I read it, junior high school. But yeah, other than that, I'm not familiar at all with his work. Are those terms that he kind of coined? Baby is talking about her ex and says, I still keep trying to understand who this person was, the good, charming person who cared about me, or the mean spirited person who manipulated, lied, and betrayed. Depending on which person I'm thinking about, I either miss him or I think good riddance. That's indeed very difficult. And it takes time, I think, to kind of for a person to wrap their brain around that because it is confusing. It's kind of the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde dynamic. That is an abusive relationship. That is a person with abusive behavior. It's like, how does that happen? How does it go from uh, there can be all of this connection and things can be so good, but like when the good times are good, they can be really great. But when the bad times are bad, they're really bad. How does that, how does such polarity exist, in one person? But yeah, um, it does, it can. One of the things that helped me, uh, well, I think one of the things that helped me was realizing that people aren't 100% bad or good, that all of us have a blend. it's again, it's the degree and frequency of the blend that makes the difference. So because I kept going back and forth, and I think that was why I was going back and forth. It's like, well, are they a good person with bad behavior, or are they a bad person with good behavior? And the reality is it's both. Like they have both, can and do exist within the same person. Um, in my context, I I realized that a lot of the good behavior that I was seeing was kind of more of the manipulation than anything. So when I found myself kind of missing that person, or um, whatever, I would remind myself, I'm like, you know what? Of course you missed that person. Like that person was awesome. Anybody would miss that person, but that's not who they really were. Like 100% of the time, that's who they wanted to be. That's who they wanted you to think that they were, but that's not who they are. Like who I think any of us really are is the person when nobody else is looking, or when we think nobody else is looking. That's when our true character comes out. And if a person's true character is destructive, if it's corrosive, if it's deadly, if it's kind of any of that, that counts for a lot more than the good times. And I just had to remind myself of that. Like, there's, it's okay to miss the person that you thought that they were, or that the person that they pretended to be. Um, you know, there was a lot to like about that person, but the person that they really were, the person that they were when you weren't looking, that person's absolutely, that really destructive. And that's, um, and that's why you're not going to go back. And that's why you're going to cut off all contact and move forward, because you can't have that in your life. So I don't know. I hope that helps. It helped me to kind of get clear with myself as to what was going on, because it's hard. Like it's hard to wrap your mind around that. And Magladora says, yeah, I miss who I thought my mom was, but how can I miss someone who never really existed? That does my head in and it hurts a lot. Yeah, it's, well, it's grieving the loss of the fantasy. And that's really what it is. When we find ourselves kind of missing a person who didn't exist, it's especially when it's with a parent, um, because it's not only the fantasy, but there's all these needs that a child has from a parent. And we might, if those needs aren't getting met, we might have been justifying why those needs weren't getting met for decades. And then when we kind of realize, oh, okay, this is what was going on, like this wasn't okay. and and we're like, oh wow, I've had this relationship with a parent, based on hope, that someday that they would turn into the mother that I needed her to be. But if that's not who she is, that's not who she is, and it's the fantasy. And it's completely understandable and reasonable and appropriate to need to mourn the loss of that fantasy. That's a part of moving into acceptance, is, oh wow, I kind of thought if I changed certain things about myself, or interacted with her differently, or did all of these things, that I could somehow earn her love or her respect or her approval. And that just never happened. And now I'm realizing that's because the dynamic with her that I really had was very different. And I kept bumping into all of this hurtful behavior. And maybe as a child, you were taking that at face value and making that about yourself, thinking that you were somehow bad or wrong because your mom didn't approve of certain things, or she was abusive or cruel or withholding, or whatnot. But hopefully now as an adult, you can look at that and see, you know what? Her behavior was a reflection of her. I was seeing all of the limitations of her. It's not about me, because it never is. Other people's behavior towards us isn't about us. It's a reflection of them. And that's powerful. Couch multiplayer asks, unlike narcissists, do sociopaths admit who they are? I'm always leery. Well, I'm always leery of anybody that says that they're um, a narcissist or a sociopath or a psychopath. To me, that's very, it's uh, more often than not, I think it's attention seeking. Um, if they're sincere in it, kind of like there was a gal in here at the beginning of the chat who was saying, that she had some concerns about her behavior. If it's coming from a place of concern, I'm more inclined to take that, I guess, you know, I think it's a person trying to figure out. They have that self awareness. There's problematic behavior that I want to look at that is concerning. That kind of thing. If a person, to me, there's a lot of like internet edgelords like kind of out there that are saying, "Oh, I'm a narcissist. I'm a psychopath. I'm a sociopath," just because it makes them feel powerful. And I um, I don't give that any time because I'm not interested in people that aren't interested in themselves, like that don't have that level of introspection to identify problematic behavior and that want to make it better. Like if you're somehow complacent to be a destructive force in the world, then I don't have time. I don't have time for that. Um, with that said, if somebody were to tell me uh, I think I'm a sociopath or I think I'm a psychopath or a narcissist or whatever, and they were to really mean it, and it wasn't coming from a place of attention seeking or some sort of like secondary gain, um, you know, type thing. If it was like they were warning me about themselves, I would take that seriously because although they may or may not be correct. Like it doesn't matter if they have a diagnosis or not. Basically, what somebody's telling you, if they're saying, "Yeah, I think I'm a sociopath," is they're basically saying, "I feel very emotionally disconnected from other people, and I truly don't care." And they probably have some kind of dark thoughts or more about like that antisocial um, behavior. And by antisocial, I mean against kind of laws and understandings of society. It's different from asocial, which means I just don't want to be around other people. So, like, just significant difference, especially for us introverts of the world. Yeah, couch multiplayer says I once had a row with a friend. I told him he was acting like a narcissist and I've dealt with too many from family. Then he said he's more of a sociopath. Well, I mean, he could I mean, that's still concerning, right? So it's still problematic. It would kind of make me question, wow, okay, he's thought about that. And again, he could have just been being edgy. Um, but either way, it's kind of like, okay, if this person, yeah, sort of like trying to identify, well, what poison am I drinking? Is it strychnine or, is it bleach? Like, well, at the end of the day, does it really matter? Like the damage to you is still going to be the same. So, yeah, if somebody's telling you that they have some sort of problematic behavior, if they're admitting that, then I would just steer clear because that's at a minimum, you're looking at that's a project and that's a lot of time and energy and um, you know, um, something that you can't didn't start with you. It's not going to end with you. It's not something that uh, it's something that they need to work on. I Speak My Truth says, as soon as I plan to move out and walk out the door, I feel a pull and I start telling myself I don't want to leave her and to stop it if I don't want to leave when I actually do want to leave. I just feel a pull and I find myself getting angry. Well, yeah, I think leaving change, okay, change of any kind is going to come with resistance because change is scary. And as human beings, we're wired for consistency, even if consistency is abuse. So it's sort of like we'd rather stay with the devil we know than go with the devil we don't. And so it's, maybe as strange as it might sound, it can be easier to stay in a very abusive or dysfunctional situation than it can be to leave it, because to leave it means you're going to be facing a lot of the unknown. Not to mention that there's oftentimes a very unhealthy level of enmeshment that's going on, especially if the other person's a parent. um, a lot of blurred boundaries, a, a lot trauma bonding, a lot of um, kind of dependence, low self-esteem, um, a lot of things to untangle. So kind of journaling about that can potentially help, kind of getting clear with yourself on, kind of what are these fears, what are these concerns, what's pulling you. And if you do journal it, so like asking yourself questions in a journal or like writing on like a Word document um, about this and then answering them and trying to come from a place of curiosity and compassion about your responses instead of judgment. Well, you should want to leave, and this is abusive, and come on, we got to just go. This kind of thing. Trying to figure out, okay, well, what is this part of me that's wanting to stay in this, and how can I best support that part in this moment? So, kind of viewing your behavior and your thoughts from a place of curiosity and compassion, it helps tremendously. Okay, Jack is saying, Dana, I sent you some emails about some topics and stuff, and I'm struggling. Please, when you have time, email me. Okay. Mhm. Um, oh, okay, I see. I see what's there's stuff going on in the chat. I'm sorry, guys, I missed that earlier. Um, okay, yeah, Jack, I will email you about that, and yeah, we can discuss that further. So, okay, yeah, I think that's very insightful. I Speak My Truth says, yeah, I feel tethered. It's a parent, and she says, yeah, I've had days where I crave my mom. So this does it sounds to me like that is more of that wounded child part in you, which I think probably all of us have. If you grew up in an abusive household, it can be more complicated for sure. But I think it helps to understand kind of these different parts of yourself from the aspect of that they're all um, that they're all parts of you, and that they're all trying to keep you safe. that they're all working towards your highest and greatest good, even though it doesn't feel like that at the time, especially when they're saying, no, 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 stay in abuse. So each of our parts pulls us to do something that's meeting some sort of need, that's designed to keep us safe, or that's designed to kind of nourish us in some way, shape, or form. And so a big part of kind of addressing that part of ourselves and um, kind of working through that is to do kind of what's known as like reparenting. So it's thinking about yourself in terms of parts. So we all have different parts to ourselves. There's that wounded child part that's scared and overwhelmed, that the world is a big scary place, that you're feeling kind of unprepared for, or that you want the reassurance of your mom, and you just kind of want to be held and be told that it's going to be okay. If you're not able to get that from your mom, or you're not able to get that from your mom like in a healthy way, then becoming tapping into that part of yourself that's that healthy adult that does have the emotional bandwidth to give you that care and that compassion and that gentleness and tenderness that you're needing, and that can help to soothe you. So you can do some visualization exercises of imagining kind of this wounded child part of you who's scared and overwhelmed, and it just feels very anxious. Imagine kind of this mothering part of you, that wounded child kind of curling up in her lap, and you just giving her a big hug and just saying, it's okay, sweetie. I know it's overwhelming. There's a lot going on. You've been through a lot. And yeah, there's quite a bit to figure it out, you know, but you're capable and you're competent, and you know where some resources are, and kind of, um, like you don't have to do it all alone, and you don't have to do it all by yourself. You don't have to figure it all out on your own. That there's resources out there, that there's that it's okay to ask for help. And so that that can help, kind of doing that. So okay, so with that said, let's kind of wind down for the night. And um yeah, so okay, let's wind down for the night. We'll go into our guided meditation. So find a place that's comfortable, either lying down or sitting down. And you can either close your eyes or just soften your gaze, whatever is the most comfortable. As you turn your attention inward, become settled in your body and in this moment. Tuning into yourself and turning into yourself. Shifting your focus from the busyness of your mind to your different senses. Your sense of hearing. Notice, what are you hearing? Perhaps it's the hum of the refrigerator or the ticking of a clock or the motor of the air conditioner or the heater, depending on where you are. Maybe it's people outside. Noticing the temperature of the space around you. If it's too warm, or if it's too chilly, or if it's just right. Noticing if there's any smells that you notice. Perhaps it's the smell from the leftover lingering smell from something that you cooked earlier. Or maybe it's the smell of your laundry detergent or your fabric softener. Or of a scented candle you lit a few days ago. And noticing what you feel, noticing the fabric around you, or the lack of fabric around you. Is the surface, is it soft? Is it firm? Is it comfortable? Is it scratchy? And continuing to breathe. Allowing yourself to drop deeper into your body and checking in with yourself and how you feel. Noticing any sensations that are coming up for you, either physical sensations or emotional sensations. If these physical or emotional sensations are coming up, and if you want, you can send a healing breath into that area and imagining that breath like loosening a knot. And recognizing that it's okay to be fully present in this moment, that we can release any regret or anger or sadness about the past, that we can release any anxiety about the future, that we can settle into this moment. And now visualize a wondrous, beautiful, healing, sparkling waterfall. Hear the sound of the water. See the mist as the spray easily and effortlessly drifts off of that waterfall. And noticing the beautiful colors, the way the sun reflects off of it, creating little mini rainbows in the waves. As you move closer to that waterfall, recognizing that this is a very special waterfall. And that it's known for its healing and restorative power. And that as you make your way underneath it, it's going to rinse away any of the anger, the pain, or the sadness that you're ready to let go of. So as you make your way under that waterfall, feeling that refreshing water as it so enjoyably just splashes over you, rinsing away everything that's ready to be released. Leaving you on the other side, feeling so rejuvenated and restored. Feeling lighter and freer and more connected to everything that's good and right about yourself and that's good and right with the world. And noticing that healing, restorative sensation deep within your body. It's as if every single cell in your body is alive and vibrating with energy and excitement. And holding on to that feeling of being connected to everything that is good and right about you, and everything that is good and right with the world. And just acknowledging that we're all on this wild ride called life. And it's beautiful and it's tragic. And it's all of these things all at once sometimes. And that life can be painful and life can be hard, but it still can be really good. And please know that you matter and that you have value. In so many ways. You have so many unique gifts that are yours and yours alone. And that a large purpose of life is to figure out and to get in tune with who you are and then to be that person. That's it. That's what that's what life is wanting of you. That there is so much that is good and right with you. So much that is good and right with you. And when you're ready, come on back and open your eyes. So, thank you. Thank you guys for being here. And um, I appreciate all your questions. I appreciate the support that you guys give each other in the chat. And yeah, everything. Mod Squad, thank you. And I will try to figure out kind of what happened to get caught up with things. Um, gosh, probably on Friday. I'm going to be out of town tomorrow. So, yes, thank you for everything. And if you want to be notified when I go live, you can text the words Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999. And if you would like some words of encouragement, you can text the words I thrive, all one word, to the same number, 22999. And take care. And I will see you guys next week. As always, lots of love to you. You are not alone. You are not crazy. And you really can move forward and heal from this. So take care. Okay. Good night.